means of implementation to achieve this goal. And this is concretized in our own agency through the SDG Cities initiative, which is a holistic and flexible approach that simplifies the pathways of cities towards SDG achievement, including SDG 11.1 on adequate housing. So we are looking at connections between what we're discussing today and what's happening in the room next door. And we believe that indeed that any national strategy related to adequate housing will depend on what happens locally and in cities. And this is the topic of the discussion today. So before we start, a few housekeeping points. So the meeting will be conducted only in English. There's no translation. This is indeed a hybrid session with equal participation for people who are online and in the room. And we will start with a group of panelists that have been invited either in person or online, and then later open the floor for your questions to the panelists or your comments on this topic. And for that, for people who are here in the room, you just raise your hand. And for those joining online, you can raise your virtual hand or share your thoughts in the chat. We will be tracking both channels, and then we hope then to have an interactive discussion in the second half of this session. So now we are going to start with a first segment, and I'm happy to introduce you a number of panelists who will be speaking today. First of all, Evelina Kiema-Majanen, who is the Senior Advisor of the Finnish Association of Cities and Municipalities, who is speaking online. Then we will have Paula Sevilla Nunez. She's a researcher of the International Institute for Environment and Development, who's with us in the room today. Then we will move to Siana Nikaile, the portfolio head of built environment from the South African Local Government Association. Welcome, sir. And also Adria Duarte, the head of the International Observatory for Participatory Democracy, and also coordination of the UCLG Committee on Social Inclusion, Participatory Democracy and Human Rights, who is also joining us online. We may have another panelist or two, depending on how the session proceeds. But without further ado, I would like to ask each of these four initial panelists a question, and then allow them maybe 5 minutes to elaborate their take on this. So we're going to start with Evelina. And we know that the Finnish model on housing emphasizes social inclusion and the housing first principle. So my question is, how has this approach helped cities address homelessness and housing insecurity, and what lessons could be transferred to other contexts? Evelina, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, Mr. Todd, Rafael. Thank you, colleagues, for inviting me here today. That's a very good question, and I really have to say I echo the words that Honorable Chair just reflected on a couple of minutes ago. My core message, if you want to leave this or remember one thing from my speech, my core message is that adequate, affordable housing is really a cornerstone, and it's also a key enabler of sustainable development. Whether we approach it from the perspective of equality, safety, public health, segregation, poverty reduction, or even the use of recycled building materials. Even if homelessness is actually a relatively limited issue in Finland at the moment, we are beginning to see some small but previously unthinkable increases in homelessness. This signals that affordable housing is not sufficiently available anymore. Especially homelessness of working families is a growing trend, and this can be also seen in the latest VLRs that the five Finnish cities produced this year. At the Association of Finnish Cities and Municipalities that I represent here, we emphasize the importance of local advocacy towards the national level, basically the ministries and the government. Municipalities really need funding and tailored solutions from the national level, but not more top-down regulatory steering. They know how to do these things successfully by themselves. So I have a couple of good practices. First, Housing First is one of them. It's a human rights-based approach to housing. And the principle is that housing is a human right. People experiencing homelessness are first provided with a permanent home, and then it is followed by tailored support services. And how does it differ from traditional models? There are no preconditions such as sobriety or treatment compliance required before receiving housing. Your own home is the first step to getting better. And the impact has been great. So long-term homelessness in Finland has dropped by over 70%, 70% since 2008. This is a big change. And how do we implement this? So it's tenancy-based housing. We have multidisciplinary support teams and both centralized and scattered housing models. Another practice that I would like to talk about here is social inclusion and belonging through housing. And the goal is to strengthen individuals' connection to their communities, enhance participation, and reduce exclusion. And some of the practices in Finland include housing advice services to prevent evictions, outreach teams offering support in everyday environments, community building through peer support and resident participation, and integrated health and social services, especially for those with complex needs and overlapping needs. And just one more good practice, I hope I still have time for this, community-based housing. They are called Malta houses in Helsinki, not referring to the island, but it's a Finnish word saying hold on or take your time. And what it actually means, it's a community-oriented housing complex or set of complexes where residents actively co-design and co-manage shared spaces and activities. And the impact has been that it strengthens social inclusion, reduces loneliness, which is a big thing in Finland, and promotes sustainable lifestyles. And the relevance for the society is that it's a strong example of inclusive and socially sustainable housing, especially in urban settings. And the residents enjoy private homes while benefiting from shared amenities like rooftop saunas. You know, saunas are a big thing also in Finland, a big positive thing. Event spaces and communal kitchens. So I'd like to end my intervention with saying that in Finland, we have learned that housing is really not just about shelter, a roof over your head. It's about dignity, it's about inclusion, and it's about opportunity. Our Housing First model, the inclusive services and community-based housing like this Malta houses, show that when local governments are empowered with resources and flexibility, they can lead transformative change in housing policy. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Evelina, for these remarks and also for keeping time. Very impressive. 70% drop of homelessness. That is actually quite spectacular, and also for sharing some of the very concrete measures that the association and Finland municipalities are adopting. So if there's any questions for her, let's keep this for the second part, for the Q&A, but we would like to move now to Paula Sevilla Nunez, who's a researcher at International Institute for Environment and Development. And of course, this is one of the world leading independent policy and action research organizations in the world. And we'd like to ask Paula, from your experience and research, what trends are you observing in how cities can tackle housing inequality and the financialization of housing? How can more inclusive local governance and stronger multilateral collaboration help build fairer and more caring cities? You have the floor, Paula.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Paula, and I'm here from IAD. And from IAD, we collaborate with a broad range of civil society, research institutions, as well as multilateral organizations and local and regional governments. And we're very much encouraged by how housing is back on the multilateral agenda, and that's largely thanks to the efforts of UN Habitat and its partners. And we're also encouraged by some of the connections that were made earlier today around aligning agendas here in COP and the World Social Development Summit happening later on, and we hope to contribute to that effort. And as part of that, at IAD, we do a lot of work on highlighting the fundamental role of local and regional governments to advance the right to housing, working with many of our partners, and including with the United Cities and local governments. And most recently, we worked on a contribution around housing as an infrastructure of care that I wanted to focus my points around, but hopefully the QR code works, and you can take a look in detail at many of the examples that have come from local and regional governments that I won't have the opportunity to go into in detail today. But as part of the efforts of the Global Report on Local Democracy and Decentralization, we have tried to think about the efforts of local and regional governments for housing using two lenses or entry points. The first one is this emphasis on care, which is one framework that local and regional governments through the constituencies in United Cities and local governments has embraced as a way of demonstrating the role that local and regional governments can play to advance economies of equality and care, and move from profit-led and consumption-led economies to ones that prioritize collective well-being and restore the reparative duty of the public sector. And the other aspect of this is the framework of housing justice, the idea that advancing a justice lens to housing policy and practice can help us challenge housing systems that are currently not delivering for people nor for the planet, because they're exclusionary, they're exploitative, they're extractive, and they're quite limited in their notions of what housing can and should be. So in the report, we look at three ways that local and regional governments can, and in many cases are already addressing housing as an infrastructure of care to deliver more sustainable, just and democratic cities and territories. And so I'll do a summary of those 3 points. The first one is promoting anti-discriminatory policies and practice that address legacies of exclusion and exploitation. And this in reality means just reaching people that have borne the brunt of historic exclusion and marginalization. So it means providing housing options for particular groups, whether it's by race, by gender, by nationality, ethnicity, age. It means providing services to homeless populations. It means encouraging women titling. It means also providing housing support and services to traditional caregivers who have mostly been women and women of color. So that's one category, and you'll see many examples of this in the report of local and regional governments that are already undertaking this. The second point is around promoting territorial equality and prioritizing the social and ecological function of land. So preventing speculative dynamics, and reaching basically places that have been either historically marginalized or that have been left out of planning. It means providing housing solutions in disaster-prone areas. It means planning urban regeneration projects in ways that prevent forced evictions and are collaborative with the communities. It means deploying vacant buildings and vacant land to restore the social function of land and protect it from speculative and market-oriented dynamics. The third pillar is promoting more democratic and just housing frameworks to address systemic inequalities and injustices. So this means essentially transforming the systems to advance more justice-oriented housing. And in this, local and regional governments have been key in, for example, promoting a more diversified view of housing. This includes also providing support to small-scale developers rather than focusing only on large-scale developments for housing that end up being high-end or market-driven. It means collaborating with communities for data collection, and ensuring participatory, meaningful inclusion throughout the design. All of this, local and regional governments play a very important role in advancing housing as an infrastructure of care and tackling inequalities, but they can't do it alone. And they, of course, need the collaboration not just with civil society and research institutions, but also multilateral institutions, national governments, and funders. So this can mean different ways. It means supporting local and regional governments to connect the housing agenda and their housing programs with other programs and other agendas, with the housing finance, with the finance ministries, with the ministries of social development. It means working with local and regional governments to support what already is on the ground, meaning community-driven work, community-driven housing, and ensuring that they have the proper legal and funding frameworks. And of course, addressing the financing gap. And in this, local and regional governments need a lot of support from national governments, from development banks, from multilateral institutions. So hopefully these are some of the steps that can be used to negotiate some outcomes at some multilateral negotiations, not just here, but in COP and the World Social Development Forum, at Financing for Development, and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paula, for those remarks on housing as an infrastructure of care and the concrete ways to achieve that, working with local and regional governments, highlighting your report. And again, if there's any questions to Paula, please jot them down and we'll have a chance to pose those questions in a few minutes. But before that, we would like to hear from Patrick Mbogo, who is our guest from our host city, Nairobi City. He's the County Executive Committee member on Built Environment and Urban Planning of Nairobi City County. And we would like to ask Patrick, since Nairobi has been at the center of rapid urban transformation, how is the county government addressing housing affordability and informal settlements upgrading while ensuring inclusion and sustainability? You have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much. My name is Patrick Mbogo, as we've been introduced. Built Environment and Urban Planning deals with aspects of land, housing, and urban planning. And Nairobi being one of the expanding cities in Africa, covering an approximately 696 square kilometers, and stands at a position of the global housing challenge. Rapid growth, population growth driven by rural to urban migration and the concentration of industries. There is also government institutions and job opportunities. And we continue to place that continues to place immense strain on our infrastructure, especially on housing. Like many large African cities, we face a severe challenge and a shortage of decent and affordable housing, resulting in the proliferation of informal settlements. Nearly 60% of our Nairobi population and the residents live in such settlements, often in deplorable conditions, lacking access to essential services and living in fear due to security of tenure. Nairobi is not paralyzed in terms of these challenges. Nairobi is doing quite a lot, and we are confronting this head-on with full recognition of every Kenyan's constitutional right to accessible and adequate housing and to reasonable standards of sanitation, as guaranteed under various articles of the Constitution. Our county government of Nairobi has prioritized the delivery of decent and affordable housing through a holistic, inclusive, and sustainable approach. Some of the key strategies that Nairobi is applying to address this challenge is on the urban renewal and regeneration program. This is a flagship initiative that aims to develop Nairobi city counties, old estates. Nairobi has 34 old estates, and that is in support of the national government's affordable housing program. And we work collaboratively with the national government and also private developers. We are unlocking land and financing large-scale, high-quality affordable housing, primarily targeting low and middle-income earners. The county of Nairobi is developing 13 estates out of the 34 old estates that are projected to deliver 60,000 new housing units to replace the existing dilapidated structures. We also have the informal settlements upgrading and prevention strategy, and our focus is community-led, in situ upgrading, providing tenure security to residents and improving essential infrastructure such as water, sanitation, roads, street lighting, and motorized transport systems. Through a partnership from our World Bank program led by the Kenya Informal Settlements Improvement Project, that is KISIP 1 and 2, we have mapped and have surveyed informal settlements and have an inventory of all the informal settlements in Nairobi. And our intention is to provide security of tenure and also enhance basic services to transform the informal areas into dignified, livable neighborhoods. We also have an intervention on policy and planning innovation. We are reforming zoning and building regulations to encourage denser mixed use and also transit-oriented developments that reduce urban sprawl and enhance economic viability. We have a bill that was enacted to law that seeks to formalize previously unapproved developments where we have invasion of public land, particularly in the informal areas. That is why, while the urban renewal and regeneration policy promotes continuous revitalization of neighborhoods, addressing emerging issues such as climate resilience and also sustainability. We are also advancing an intergovernmental approach to the housing challenge. The ambition of ensuring adequate housing for all is far too vast for any single level of government to achieve alone. Effective collaboration between national and county governments and also with the international partners is quite critical. Counties, as provided under Urban Cities, Areas and Cities Act, hold primarily responsibility for urban planning, which is a devolved function within their latter jurisdictions. and local government understand community needs, land dynamics, and also regulatory bottlenecks. We know which areas require upgrading and which designs resonate with the local culture. To strengthen our role and effectiveness, counties and local governments require three key enablers from our national and international partners. Decentralized financial autonomy. Counties and local authorities need direct access to sustainable financing mechanism, and also localized agendas demand that localized and predictable funding is availed. We also have the issue of technical capacity on building, that is an enhanced support in sustainable building technologies, innovative financing, and large-scale project management. A clear legislative framework for national governments that enact laws that reinforce intergovernmental cooperation in housing, planning, and land management, thus reducing bureaucratic duplication and ambiguity. So, in conclusion, we call for partnership because this is a special event on local and government housing that is not just merely a discussion. It is an acknowledgement that the housing challenge will be won or lost in our cities, towns, and neighborhoods. By amplifying the voices and actions of local leaders, we are not just talking about sustainable urbanization. We are actively building on it. I look forward to the dialogue ahead and to learning from the experiences of my colleagues and other countries. And on behalf of Nairobi City County Government, I wish to reiterate that we remain eager and committed to deepening our partnership with the UN Habitat, the national government, and the private sector, and most importantly, our communities, to ensure that adequate and dignified housing becomes a right and not a privilege for every resident, regardless of the social status.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Patrick Mbogo, with your explanation on what Nairobi County is doing in terms of urban renewal, strengthening basic services with national government, private sector, and international actors, and also stressing the need for autonomy and strong local finance. Thank you so much. We're staying now in Africa, moving to South Africa, where we have Mr. Siana Nkale, who is the portfolio head of built environment in the South African Local Government Association, SALGA. And SALGA has been at the forefront of efforts to address housing backlogs and spatial inequality in South Africa. And my question to you is, from SALGA's perspective, what are the most effective ways local governments can strengthen their role in ensuring adequate housing while coordinating with the national level? You have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, Program Director. As indicated, my name is Siana Nkale. I come from the South African Local Government Association. Indeed, as an association of cities or association of municipalities, we believe we have a role in facilitating the delivery of sustainable urban development and sustainable human settlements in particular, through a facilitative role. I would like to pick on the very last comment in your introductory remarks and question, Chair, and that is about the facilitation of cooperation between the multiple layers of the state, and perhaps use our own experiences in South Africa. In South Africa, we have three spheres of government: national, regional, which we refer to as province, and the local level, our municipalities and the different categories of municipalities. Now, starting with our constitution and subservient pieces of law, we have entrenched the role of local government in development and governance. A particular one that I may refer to is the Intergovernmental Relations Framework Act. Coming out of that, in us implementing it, we have established a structure which we call a MINMEC loosely, but it is where the minister at the national level meets the leadership at the regional or provincial level and the leaders of municipalities. In this particular instance, it will be the leaders responsible for housing. We are fortunate today to be graced by one of the political and administrative principals from one of our cities called eThekwini, who participate in this structure. The objective of this structure is to make sure that at any given point, the policy implementation, the planning, monitoring, evaluation, and addressing of any bottlenecks that comes is done jointly while we all sit around the table. From a SALGA point of view, we are a voice that represents all municipalities in the country. There's 257 of them. But because of the critical role that is played by the bigger cities, which we refer to as metropolitan municipalities, there's 8 of them. We have facilitated that they also have a direct seat at this structure that coordinates multi-level planning and policy coordination. So that's that in terms of the structure and the system that we have set up. It seems to work. It is not perfect, of course, but it seems to work in terms of joint planning, identification of whatever bottlenecks that they may be, and joint intervention. Maybe to bring it at a practical level, there is a funding that I'll speak to perhaps as a parting shot that the national government allocates to human settlements. Part of that is directly delivered to these 8 metropolitan municipalities. In order for them to be able to access that, they need to submit business plans. And in those business plans, we identify firstly the linkages with the national policy agenda and the outcomes that the country seeks to address. But in that, you need to identify specific projects with specific locations of where they will be, the specific communities that they will address, the number of people that will benefit from those, and how they link with everything else. It is on the basis of that business plan that the money then flows. Now, historically, we had a situation where business plans would be submitted to access that money. The national department would assess them. Sometimes it would take a couple of months to do the assessment before money can flow. Through this structure and through the coordination that we have facilitated, we have gotten to a point where we are able to sit around the table before the financial year starts, identify those projects. If there's any concerns that the national government has before it can disperse any of the money, they identify that and voice it out before the year starts. By the time the year is about to begin, the money is then able to flow and the city is then empowered to start the execution. So we are then able to fast track the planning, the delivery of the funding, and by extension, the starting of the implementation of the actual projects themselves. And we believe that it is only through that collaboration between the different arms of the state that we were able to identify that there was a bottleneck here in the value chain between policy alignment, planning, project packaging, funding flows, and implementation, monitoring, and evaluation. If we were not working together as a state, I think that value chain would not have been identified as effectively. I must say, of course, it is still not perfect. There's still areas that we continue to raise as concerns. We are also sitting, I think, our head of strategy and policy is also in the room, who comes from the national department. She knows that while we agree in many instances and while we can fly together to places like this and represent the country, where we disagree, and sometimes we disagree quite aggressively. But you all know that it is coming from a good place, and by the time we identify the interventions, we are able to be constructive and identify the interventions effectively. Perhaps as a parting shot, I've already spoken about the monies, so I won't speak about that. There's a specific targeted fund towards housing and directed towards municipalities. I just want to highlight the role of the city in general and in housing in particular, by emphasizing what we see quite fortunately and excitedly, how cities are being placed or acknowledged that cities are at the forefront of sustainable development generally, of sustainable urban development, and sustainable and integrated human settlements in particular. Without an empowered local authority system, our ability to deliver on the SDGs and our ability to deliver on adequate housing will be severely compromised. Why do we say that? In fact, by the way, it is something that was emphasized at our version of the Urban Forum. You know, there's a World Urban Forum. We have a National Urban Forum as well. We were fortunate to have the second sitting of that in August this year. One of the top priorities that everybody, national, private sector, civil society, emphasizes that the cities are at the forefront of driving this delivery. In the same token, you would recall that South Africa holds the presidency of the U20. In that context, we convened a U20 mayoral summit. In that same platform as well, there was the acknowledgement that cities are at the forefront of sustainable development and sustainable urban development in particular. Now, while they are at the center, they are then tasked with this funding that is supported, that is utilized to support them. They are mandated, at least in South Africa, to drive a number of different categories of housing programs. One of them is where we deliver housing for the most vulnerable in society. I must say, over the past years since our democracy, we've delivered 5 or so million housing opportunities, or housing 5 million families. And a large part of that is driven by the interventions of municipalities. Of course, in collaboration with the provincial governments and with the support of national government. A large part of those are in these 8 metropolitan municipalities that I have spoken about. Informal settlement upgrading is a specific housing category where there is a specific financing instrument. We call it the Informal Settlement Upgrading Partnership Grant, ISUPG. And it does nothing else except for targeting the upgrading of informal settlements. There seems to be a growing acknowledgement and agreement that that funding needs to be upgraded in line with the priorities, that UN Habitat and other partners have agreed on. And then I'm not going to speak about all of them, but the last one that I want to speak on is social housing, or as a proxy also to affordable rental accommodation. Poor people, like everybody else, move around. So you may own a house in a particular city or in a particular part of the city, but when you move across town because there's a employment or other economic opportunities, suddenly now you lose the benefit from the state because you benefited elsewhere. But if there is an adequate stock of affordable rental accommodation, you can then be able to participate in the mainstream economy. We acknowledge that as things stand now, our affordable rental stock is struggling to keep up with the demand, particularly of the poor and vulnerable. The rental stock of the middle income and higher end of the market, that can take care of itself. But at the lower end of the scale, the stock is not adequate, and it is one of the areas that we are advocating in this partnership that we are talking about as different spheres of government to strengthen that. And I'm hoping that we can be able to work together with the UN Habitat and other partners that have succeeded in that to continue to strengthen that as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. Mr. Siama from Salga, highlighting the partnership with between the three levels of the three spheres, I should say, of government in South Africa, and also how to resolve bottlenecks between these different levels, also the financing, and then specific attention to informal settlement, social housing, and also rental housing. This connects very well with the discussions in the other room, of course, on the recommendations. With that, we now move to the final speaker. Before we open the floor, we already have some questions in the chat. Please add to that or prepare your question. But before that, I would like to give the floor to Adria Duarte, that is the head or the coordinator of the UCLG Committee on Social Inclusion, Participatory Democracy and Human Rights. So UCLG, we know UCLG well, and UCLG has long championed the right to housing and the right to the city as core elements of inclusive urban governance. And from your perspective, Adria, how can participatory democracy strengthen housing policies and ensure that no one is left behind?
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Dear Chair, dear colleagues, I'm honored to speak today on behalf of the Organized Constituency of Local and Regional Governments, represented through United Cities and Local Governments, UCLG. Let me begin by thanking the organizers for including local and regional governments in this discussion. We are not only implementers of housing policies, we are also key political actors confronting the global housing crisis, which stands at the very heart of equitable, inclusive, and sustainable development. The housing crisis is not merely a social or economic issue, it's a democratic one. When people are denied access to adequate housing, they are also denied full participation in society. They lose trust in institutions and a sense of belonging in their communities. This is why, guided by the principle of care, equity, and local democracy, local and regional governments are working every day to defend and expand the right to adequate housing for all, as the previous speakers has been explaining really well. Housing is not just a physical structure, it's the foundation of dignity, the condition for accessing public services, and the place where belonging and opportunity begin. But sustainable and inclusive housing cannot be achieved without empowered local governments, governments that are recognized, resourced, and represented in international decision-making spaces. Our mandate, our technical expertise, and our institutional capacity make us indispensable partners in addressing this crisis. Through the Global Task Force of Local and Regional Governments and the World Assembly of Local and Regional Governments, our constituency ensures that local realities shape global solutions. This is fully aligned with the new urban agenda, which recognizes the World Assembly as the mechanism for local follow-up and review, confirming that sustainable urbanization depends on empowered local and regional governments. At UCLG, we have built on this mandate by creating the Local Social Covenant, a political platform uniting local governments and the organized civil society. This covenant embodies local multilateralism and calls for renewed social contract, placing housing at the center of justice, care, and sustainability for present and future generations. Our approach to housing justice is grounded in three pathways. The first one is housing as a human right, as the foundation of caring cities, ensuring universal access to local public services and local systems of care. Second, by defending and expanding the social function of land through proximity and community-led management of territories. And third, by developing climate resilient and sustainable housing solutions to respond to the growing impacts of climate crisis. And today, our call to action is clear. First, we call for localized and community-driven solutions. Housing justice must be led by local governments and co-created with communities, especially with youth, women, and marginalized community groups. As you may in your question, Chair, I think that's the point, no? When communities design and own housing solutions, policies become more inclusive, more effective, and more just. Second, we call for decentralized financial mechanism for housing justice. Local action requires long-term, predictable financing. Bridging the urban financing gap is essential to support community-led, sustainable housing programs, and to make the right, adequate housing not just a promise, but a lived reality. Colleagues, the right to adequate housing is both a global commitment and a local responsibility. Through solidarity, shared action, and the daily work of local and regional governments, we are building caring, inclusive, and climate-resilient communities that embodies the promise of the new urban agenda and the 2030 agenda. And for all of that, of course, as you were asking me, I think it's quite important to really embeds this participatory approach for the design of co-creating solutions for housing. And it's so important to deploy different initiatives like participatory budgeting, climate assemblies, or other kind of mechanism to involve like civil society organizations and communities in this design of solutions, of course, with the cooperation of the local and regional governments. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Adria. Outlining the different roles of UCLG to the Global Task Force and the World Assembly, emphasizing all the different dimensions in that regard. We have had some questions already in the chat that were responded to. There was a specific question on homelessness for Finland, and there was a response related to that in the chat, saying that homelessness is more expensive than housing first approach, and you can look for more details in the chat. But I understand that we have someone who is also online, Mr. Christian Hubel, the head of the Department of Strategic Governance of the city of Mannheim in Germany, who would have a contribution to make. Mr. Christian, can you speak from online?
Yes, I can. Thank you, Mr. Tutz, and thank you for inviting the city of Mannheim for sharing our experiences with affordable housing. First of all, when we worked out our mission statement 2030 from the Sustainable Development Goals with our citizens, they said us that one of the top topics is affordable housing in Mannheim. So we had to look how we can manage this. We were lucky because we have a municipal enterprise which has about 20,000 houses, where 46,000 people are living it, and which is renting this to these people. About 20% are below the average market price. We are doing this despite to other German cities who were selling their properties and their flats because they have to pay out pledges from the municipal budget. But in our political discussions, the people were saying it's no choice for us. We need these instruments for giving affordable houses to the people of Mannheim. And so we also make some care services beyond this renting flats. We are looking for care work. We also have quota management, and we try to employ their people who have difficulties on the normal job market. So first of all, we see that a municipality has to be active in this way to work on the topic on affordable houses, because in our experiences, the private market will not solve this problem. We are also looking that we are developing conversion areas from the military space or others. Therefore, we have to buy it first. Then we are developing it with investors. But we said, when you want to invest here, you have to sign a contract that 30% of the flats you're building have to be affordable housing, so that people who with social needs are able to rent in the city of Mannheim and not outside a flat, because when they're working here and or whether they're unemployed, they have to stay here in the city. So you have to promote this and manage this very very actively. We also are buying real estates. Therefore, we have money which we give to younger families who want to build here a home. Sometimes we sell it for a price which is lower on the market price. But the other hand, which is a very good instrument in Germany, is to give it to a leasehold so that the young families only have to build the house and not or have to buy the real estate in addition. We are also identifying properties where landlords are renting single beds to exorbitant prices, mostly to immigrants or daily labor workers for about 200 euros a week. And so we are searching, identifying them, and then bringing this into court so that these landlords are not able to make their business anymore. We also have that, but this is a problem, not a problem. This is an instrument of Germany, a social welfare system, where we are able to give money to people who are not able to afford their life and the rental of a flat in Mannheim. They get additional money, but therefore we also have to look: is the flat too big or is it equal to the needs of these people? So you have to do a lot of matching. We also try to establish a swapping platform where we say we have especially older people who are living in big flats, and we have families who don't have the possibility to afford big flats. So we try to make a change. Perhaps the older people who are now alone are going into a tiny flat, and the family is able to swap into the bigger flat. This is at the moment a project. It's running for about 5 months, but we have some efforts, about 6 swapping exchanges we have made, but we have to look what are more opportunities on this. We also try to actively build new houses where it was in the former years forbidden due to legal laws. There we have to look to be innovative, to have also a legal framework which makes it possible. And we are also looking perhaps on new innovations. Perhaps is there a cheaper way of building flats and houses with 3D printers, or perhaps in the next 2 or 3 years with artificial intelligence. Nevertheless, with this engagement in affordable houses, we also have a challenge, because a lot of people from the region are now coming a little bit more than we can manage to Mannheim, because they're saying, hey, when I'm living in Frankenthal or otherwise, 50 kilometers away, the city of Mannheim is doing a good job. So I try to get there affordable housing, which brings a little bit more pressure to our housing market. But we have to manage this also. But first of all, I think is the municipality and the councillors and the mayor has to be convinced that you have to work actively on affordable housing. And with the citizens worked out mission statement 2030, we had the duty and the pledge to work on this topic, and we are also measuring it so that we say we always want to have at least 2% of renting decrease every year, so that we have to stable it. And we are working on this with these different measures. And to be honest, when we look to other cities, we have good efforts. We have to work more on it, but the best instrument for us was still staying to this municipal enterprises, because without this leverage, we weren't able to manage affordable housing for more than 40,000 people. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Christian Hubel. I mean, this was very, very interesting. Your emphasis on the city-owned housing enterprise, the active role of municipalities in addressing housing issues for different groups of your city, and the swapping platform, I think very innovative solutions, and also indicating that you may be becoming the victim of your own success and as a cause of differentiated approaches by different municipalities in the same region. Thank you very much. This was very useful. So we have now maybe a few minutes for questions from here, the floor, from people online. I think we have covered already the chat, but please, any of the speakers, you may address them directly. Nairobi City Council, SALGA, Finland, IIED, Germany, and UCLG. So these were the 6 speakers. Any questions, any experiences that you have that may complement this are welcome. We still have a few minutes. We don't want to stretch it too long because we have to go back to the other room soon, but we are open for Q&A. Yes, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, Chair of the session. I'll be very brief because of time. I think it's more of a comment than a question. Firstly, I think we should appreciate all the panelists for their presentation. One thing that I've noted, this is, I don't know, maybe my 4th or 5th time attending. I'm Councillor Kuzwayo. I'm a local leader in a Tegulu municipality, which is in Durban, South Africa. And we are very resolved in terms of providing adequate housing. That is why I'm here with the director or responsible for human settlements. But I'm getting a sense of unison. I think we are starting to speak in one voice. We are all understanding that a provision of adequate housing is not a favor, but what we are doing, especially through these conferences, is to recalibrate ourselves in terms of the work that we are doing. Because if you talk about a future, there won't be a future if people do not have houses. People need to have adequate houses so that they can be able to plan for their future, so that the security of tenure, as the leader from Nairobi was expressing here, and in the absence of that, then you will know that there's going to be a problem. I was particularly impressed by the work that Finland has done. I mean, 70% is a huge number. We are still struggling in our country in dealing with the problem of homelessness, but of course we are coming with solutions guided by national government in terms of how we deal with that. And our biggest problem is urban migration. So that is just making us to chase a moving target. So we never even have an accurate number of how many people we're actually trying to deal with, because every day the numbers are changing. But I think we are taking shape, and I'm really happy with the resolutions that we are going to be taking today. And I really hope that each and every country that participates here is going to push, because if all nations speak in one voice, then our government are really going to listen, and they're going to act in a manner that is going to make sure that in the nearest future we'll be able to say we have adequately provided housing for our people. I thank you.
Thank you very much, colleague from Durban. Indeed, the housing is seen as the roof of the SDGs. Without housing, it is impossible to achieve many of the Sustainable Development Goals. And I think you have captured that very clearly, very well. Let's see if there's any other comments, either from in the room. Gentleman there, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Abdihamud from Somalia. And I have been cooperating with local government for more than 23 years. I collaborate with the SALGA. I led local economic development, habitat, UCLG, PNG International, and many local governance organizations. But sometimes we develop programs on affordable housing, shelter for IDBs, service delivery, legal frameworks, infrastructure, and also local elections. But the most pressing challenging situation is the municipal financing. Sometimes you made a plan, but you cannot afford to realize that plan. So that question is addressed to to all of you, Salga Island and UN Habitat. How do you ensure to have sufficient financing for affordable housing or for shelter for IDPs or for other service deliveries at local level? How do you ensure sufficient financing in that area? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So let's start with Salga, since you named them as a first responder on the, yes, where do we get or how do we ensure municipal finance for affordable housing?
Sure. Yeah. So in my input earlier, I spoke about the solution and having dedicated funding for housing delivery. I think what the question is raising is that even that is not always adequate, because it comes in the context of the sustainability or the strength of the finances of the municipality as a whole. If I start with the part that we have seemed to be getting right, is that as a country, having noted that the most vulnerable will not be able to make it on their own, and part of their vulnerability, or rather we have a number of social packages, grants for disabled people living with disability, for old age, etc., etc. One of those state-supported interventions is on housing. And we have a criteria to determine the amount of income that you should be getting or not getting in order to qualify for a state-supported housing opportunity. And those opportunities vary from an outright giveaway house to a serviced site, to a subsidized rental accommodation, etc. So there's ring-fenced funding for that. But when you consider the fact that the adequacy of housing relates to other things that the municipality must fund, such as this roof that you now have over your head must be close to public transport so that you can be able to get to work, or it must be close to a park where kids can play, or other social amenities or health facilities, some of which now must come out of the municipal budget, many of whom do not have. We have gotten into a conversation with the government to change the assumptions that we made in the municipal finances. The way the municipal finance is structured is that we need to raise our own funds from rates, from service charges, from municipal taxes. Those are very, very inadequate. So the submission we've made to our partners at the national government is to relook at how the local government is funded, so that while it must still raise its own funding from rates and taxes and service charges, we need to fund the vulnerable out of the national fiscus. It's always going to be a difficult one because the national fiscus in many instances itself is constrained. But if the objective is to support the most vulnerable, then it cannot be left to the means of the municipality alone. Of course, it cannot run away from the fact that we do need to grow our local economies, because it is when the local economy grows that the rates base becomes a bit higher and there'll be enough people, there'll be a lot more people paying for those rates and taxes. But as a collective, to fund that social package of the poorest of the poor, it has to be a collective responsibility. That's the approach that we're taking as Salga and as a country, as a collective. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Let's see if there's any other questions.
Nairobi.
Okay, Nairobi, also please respond.
Thank you very much. I wish to reiterate that the Nairobi approach, maybe it's different and possibly it's good to sensitize the delegates. What Nairobi does, out of the 34 estates, that the older states, we are currently doing 13, And much of the spaces within the old estates, there's vast spaces where the model that we apply is that we invite investors and we come up with a joint venture where the contribution from the county is the land. The land is valued and becomes the capital shareholding of that JV. Then the houses that are done by the developers, there is a provision for market units, which once they're able to dispose, they are able to recoup their capital injection into the joint venture. Within the joint venture, the structure of the units is that we have a proportion of social houses, social units. We have a proportion of the marketing units for the developer to dispose and recover their costs. We have tenant purchase where some of the national government and county employees take up and through a mortgage system, they pay on a monthly basis through deductions from their payrolls. Then we also have institutional houses, so that in areas where the county has to provide services, the staff working in those areas are able to take up units there and are deducted through a check-off system. So we have about 5 categories in each of the 13 affordable housing projects. This also complements, the national government also has the affordable housing program, where through a tax system, the civil servants there's a contribution to the fund. This fund currently now, the various counties are able now to apply to fund some of their affordable housing projects in the 47 counties, and even other government agencies that deal with the issue of housing. So that approach ensures that the county is able to deliver. In fact, towards the end of the year, we are going to deliver almost 5,000 units, which is categorized into all those categories. So the county does not tax. It partners with developers to implement these projects. And we have 2 projects that starts delivering houses by the end of this year. 7 others are underway. And what happens is the land that we construct, which is able to deliver quite like we are supposed to deliver about 60,000 units in a very small proportion of land. And what the county does now, because of the volumes and the numbers of population introduced in those project investment areas, the county now provides budget for infrastructure expansion, the roads, the sewer, and all the other government agencies like the Nairobi Water and Sewer, which does provision of sewerage and sanitation. Also, because it's a subsidiary of the county, it is also advised to provide budgets for sewerage expansion and also the road networks. All the agencies, county funds the expansion of infrastructure, while the developer now does the projects to ensure that they're able to deliver units on housing. We have complementation from another program called the county through the national government is also doing what is called the Nairobi River Regeneration. All the Nairobi rivers now will become frontiers for housing, where because of the invasion of the river corridor, a buffer is placed in between the informal settlements and the river corridor, so that there will be social housing funded by the national government, then eventually transferred to the county to create a buffer, so that there will be no more invasion of the river corridor once it's cleaned, and it's already underway. Starting with the Nairobi River Corridor, which is about 38 kilometers. So we have various approaches to ensure that we're able to address the issue of housing from the Nairobi perspective.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This shows the diversity of approaches in South Africa, in Kenya, in Nairobi. Very, very interesting. But all approaches have a combination of local government, national government, and usually private sector for investment. Does anyone else want to intervene? We don't have much time left, but a final question, maybe Paula, you would like to say something to reflect on what you have heard from other speakers, if you want.
Perhaps also just on the finance question, I was thinking of 2 points to jointly reflect. One of them is that, of course, it sounds cliche to say that there's no one-size-fits-all solution, but when it comes to municipal finance, not all municipalities are going to have the same access or capacity to different funding mechanisms. So it's important to understand how each context applies. And in that sense, it's not just about getting finance from the central governments, but also collaborating with central governments and other technical and funding partners to access other sources of finance. And this can be own source revenues from land value capture mechanisms, but also access towards funding from development banks, say access to green and social bonds. And there's a lot of innovation happening already by many cities and local and regional governments in that aspect, and getting technical capacity for more municipalities who might be able to access those kinds of financing is important. And the other areas is that I wanted to emphasize is exploring partnerships with the residents themselves. And I think that there's a lot of examples of savings groups and community-led financing schemes that, when brought in collaboration with local and regional governments, they can provide substantial financing and leverage further funds, whether it's from local, national level government entities, international governments, philanthropies. And so I can think of examples in Namibia and Zimbabwe where they've set up revolving city funds. They've set up funds that are co-managed with residents and informal settlements to advance incremental housing. And so when these structures are created, they can actually be quite catalytic in terms of leveraging further financing for housing improvements.
Thank you very much for complementing a series of other solutions on housing finance with a strong role for the local government. We're going to close this session now. Thanks so much for spending your lunch break here. Thanks to all the panelists for very insightful contributions and for the good debate. I would like to connect now with the next room where everyone is going, hopefully, after a couple of minutes. And we hope that this type of reflections about local, national collaboration on housing will continue in the open-ended intergovernmental expert working group, and that perhaps when they prioritize future topics, which they have to do today and tomorrow for the next 3-4 years, that this topic on relationship between local and national governments and other partners in delivering housing, expanding delivery of housing may be prioritized. I also would like to recommend delegations to be inclusive of local governments. That's already the start, as we see in South Africa, for being more inclusive and have the voice of local governments during this meeting. There's nothing stopping national governments to invite local governments to join the delegation of this working group. With that, I think we have come to the end of the session. Thanks so much for joining us, and enjoy the rest of the 2 days. And we have about 10 minutes for a stretch, and then we see each other in the other room. Thank you so much.